For centuries, people believed it was nothing more than a legend, a city swallowed by the jungle, a place so magnificent that entire civilizations spoke of it, yet no one could prove it had ever existed. Most explorers gave up. Governments dismissed it. Scientists called it a myth. But one man refused to stop searching. He sacrificed decades of his life, crossing the world's most dangerous forests, survived disease, starvation, poisonous animals, and countless failures, all because he believed everyone else was wrong. When people laughed at him, he kept walking. When maps failed, he made his own. When every expedition ended in disappointment, he simply prepared for the next one. Many thought he'd gone insane. Others believed the jungle itself had claimed him forever. Yet years later, the impossible happened. Evidence emerged that the mysterious city he had spent his life searching for had been real all along. But the greatest mystery wasn't the lost city itself. It was a man who disappeared while trying to find it. This is the extraordinary true story of the explorer who dedicated his entire life to a forgotten civilization and unknowingly inspired one of the greatest archaeological discoveries in modern history. History is filled with people who chase impossible dreams. Some search for hidden treasure. Others hunted mythical creatures. A few devoted their lives to solving mysteries that everyone else considered impossible. Most failed, but occasionally, history rewards the stubborn. Long before satellites photographed every corner of the earth, before drones mapped dense forests, and before archaeologists uncovered countless forgotten civilizations, much of South America's interior remained almost completely unknown. Millions of acres of rainforest stretched endlessly across Brazil, Bolivia, Peru, and neighboring countries. Entire mountain ranges disappeared beneath thick vegetation. Ancient roads vanished under centuries of vines. Massive stone cities were slowly reclaimed by nature until they became invisible. To European explorers, these forests represented the last great blank space on the map. Stories circulated among indigenous tribes. They spoke of abandoned cities, golden temples, stone roads disappearing into the jungle, civilizations older than memory itself. Most scholars dismissed these tales as folklore. After all, no evidence existed. Generations of explorers searched. Almost all returned empty-handed. Some never returned at all. As the 20th century approached, one British officer became obsessed with those forgotten stories. Unlike treasure hunters, he wasn't interested in gold. He wanted something even greater. Proof that history itself had misunderstood an entire civilization. His name was Percy Harrison Fawcett, and his obsession would eventually become one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of exploration, because although the world remembers the city he searched for, few remember the extraordinary journey that brought him there. This is not simply the story of a lost city. It is the story of obsession, hope, discovery, sacrifice, and one of history's greatest disappearances, long before he became one of history's most famous explorers. Percy Harrison Fawcett was simply a curious English boy, born in 1867 into a respectable family. He grew up during the height of the British Empire. Maps fascinated him. Books about distant lands filled his imagination. While other children dreamed of becoming soldiers or businessmen, Percy dreamed about places no one had ever seen. Victorian Britain celebrated explorers. Names like David Livingstone and Henry Morton Stanley filled newspapers. Their expeditions across Africa inspired an entire generation. To young Percy, adventure wasn't entertainment. It was a calling. As he grew older, he entered military service. Discipline shaped him. He developed remarkable endurance, patience, leadership, skills that would later prove essential in places where even survival could not be taken for granted. Yet military life never fully satisfied him. Every report arriving from distant continents reignited something inside him. The world still contained mysteries. Entire regions remained unexplored. Blank spaces still existed on official maps. Those empty places called to him. He could not ignore them. Years later, that restless curiosity would carry him farther than he could ever have imagined, into forests few outsiders had survived, toward a mystery that would consume the rest of his life. By the beginning of the 20th century, Percy Fawcett had become something far more valuable than an ordinary explorer. He had become one of the Royal Geographical Society's most trusted surveyors. This wasn't a glamorous job. It demanded mathematical precision, patience, and an extraordinary ability to remain calm under impossible conditions. His mission was simple in theory: travel into remote regions of South America, measure rivers, locate mountains, chart borders, and return with accurate maps. In reality, it was among the most dangerous occupations in the world. Entire expeditions disappeared without explanation. Malaria claimed thousands of lives every year. Yellow fever swept through settlements without warning. Venomous snakes hid beneath nearly every fallen tree. Jaguar tracks often appeared outside camps before sunrise. Some rivers contained electric eels capable of stunning a grown man. Others were home to giant anacondas and schools of piranhas. But strangely, none of those dangers frightened Percy. What fascinated him was something else entirely. Every expedition introduced him to indigenous tribes. Many had never spoken to Europeans before. Communication came slowly, often through gestures, occasionally through interpreters. But over time, patterns began to emerge. Different tribes, separated by hundreds of miles, repeated remarkably similar stories. They spoke of enormous stone roads hidden beneath vines, ancient staircases leading nowhere, broken statues buried beneath roots, ruined cities reclaimed by the forest. Some described walls covered with strange carvings. Others mentioned massive plazas where no villages existed anymore. One elderly tribal leader drew shapes in the dirt. He sketched squares, large buildings, long avenues. Then he pointed deep into the jungle. "There," he whispered. "People lived there long before us." Most Europeans dismissed such accounts. Missionaries believed they were legends. Government officials ignored them. Scientists argued that the Amazon rainforest could never have supported large civilizations. The soil was supposedly too poor, the climate too harsh, the forest too unforgiving. According to accepted history, the Amazon had always been sparsely populated. Percy wasn't convinced, because every month, the evidence became harder to ignore. He began noticing unusual earthworks visible from nearby hills, perfectly straight embankments, circular formations too symmetrical to be natural, stone fragments where no stone should exist, ancient pottery buried beneath layers of vegetation. Someone had lived here, not just small tribes, something much larger, something organized, something history had forgotten. Then, one evening inside a colonial archive, everything changed. While studying centuries-old Portuguese documents, Percy discovered an extraordinary manuscript, known today as Manuscript 512. It described an expedition conducted in the 18th century. According to its anonymous author, explorers had stumbled upon an enormous abandoned city hidden deep inside Brazil. The report described towering stone arches, wide streets, multi-story buildings, statues unlike anything found elsewhere in South America. There were inscriptions carved into walls, grand squares, massive temples, even an enormous column standing in the center of the city. The explorers believed they had discovered the remains of an unknown civilization, yet fear prevented them from staying. Unable to relocate the city, they eventually abandoned the search. The manuscript was filed away and forgotten. Most historians considered it fantasy. Some argued the explorers had exaggerated ordinary ruins. Others insisted the entire document had been fabricated. But Percy reacted differently. He didn't see fantasy. He saw clues. Every description matched stories he had already heard from indigenous tribes. The manuscript didn't stand alone. It confirmed dozens of independent accounts collected over many years. For the first time, pieces of an enormous puzzle began fitting together. Perhaps there really had been a forgotten civilization hidden beneath the Amazon. If so, it would completely rewrite human history. Most men would have admired the mystery, then returned home. Percy Harrison Fawcett made a different decision. He would find it himself, whatever it took, however long it required, even if no one believed him. By 1906, Percy Fawcett had stopped wondering whether the lost city existed. His question had become much simpler. Where was it? Finding the answer, however, would require entering one of the least explored places on Earth, the Amazon rainforest. Today, satellites can reveal rivers hidden beneath the trees. Aircraft can photograph mountains in a matter of hours. GPS devices prevent explorers from becoming hopelessly lost. But in Fawcett's time, none of that existed. Once an expedition disappeared beneath the rainforest canopy, the outside world lost all contact. There were no radios, no helicopters, no emergency rescue teams. If something happened, no one was coming. Every expedition depended entirely on its own preparation. Food had to last for months. Medical supplies were painfully limited. Every rifle cartridge mattered. Every compass reading could determine whether men lived or died. The jungle itself became an enemy. The air was thick with humidity. Clothing never truly dried. Leather boots slowly rotted. Metal rusted astonishingly fast. Maps dissolved under constant rain. Even breathing felt exhausting. Each step demanded effort. Towering trees blocked sunlight. Vines wrapped themselves around every trunk. The forest floor disappeared beneath roots, mud, insects, and fallen branches. Progress wasn't measured in miles. Sometimes, an entire day of hacking through vegetation advanced the expedition less than 2 kilometers, and that was on good days. Rainstorms transformed trails into rivers. Small streams became raging torrents overnight. Crossing them meant risking everything. One wrong step, and a man could disappear beneath the current forever. Then came the insects. Mosquitoes formed clouds so dense they darkened the air. Many carried malaria. Others spread yellow fever. Tiny sand flies bit exposed skin relentlessly. Ticks embedded themselves beneath clothing. Venomous spiders hid inside boots left unattended. Sleeping offered little relief. At night, the jungle awakened. Howler monkeys echoed through the darkness. Strange birds screamed without warning. Branches cracked somewhere beyond the campfire. Every unfamiliar sound forced exhausted men awake. Sometimes it was only an animal. Sometimes it wasn't. Despite these dangers, Fawcett remained remarkably calm. Years in South America had taught him something many explorers never understood. The jungle rewarded respect, not fear. He refused unnecessary violence. Unlike many expeditions of the era, he rarely fired his weapon unless absolutely necessary. He discouraged his men from hunting excessively. He insisted they avoid provoking wildlife. Most importantly, he treated indigenous communities with unusual respect. This decision surprised many European officers. At the time, some explorers considered local tribes obstacles rather than people. Fawcett thought differently. He believed survival often depended upon earning trust. Whenever possible, he approached villages peacefully. He exchanged gifts, listened far more than he spoke, asked questions instead of making demands. Gradually, stories emerged. Again and again, the elders mentioned ancient places abandoned generations before their own ancestors had arrived. Some refused to speak further. Others became visibly uncomfortable. One elderly hunter quietly traced a symbol into the soil, a circle. Inside it, several straight lines intersecting one another. Then he erased it immediately. Without another word, he walked away. Fawcett stared silently at the disturbed earth. He had seen similar geometric patterns elsewhere, too precise to be natural, too consistent to ignore. That evening, as rain hammered against the canvas tents, he opened his journal. Instead of recording rivers or mountains, he wrote only one sentence. Every tribe remembers something. Asterisk, history has simply forgotten. Asterisk, those words revealed how deeply the mystery had taken hold. This was no longer just another surveying mission. It had become personal. Every ruined staircase, every carved stone, every forgotten story pulled him deeper into an obsession from which there would be no return. His companions noticed a change. Around the campfires, conversations increasingly centered on one subject, the hidden civilization. Some believed it might contain unimaginable treasure. Others imagined magnificent temples covered in gold. Fawcett dismissed such fantasies. Gold meant nothing to him. If he found the city, its greatest treasure would not be wealth. It would be knowledge, proof that an advanced civilization had flourished where scholars insisted none could ever have existed. If he succeeded, history books across the world would need to be rewritten, and if he failed, he would become just another explorer swallowed by the Amazon. Neither possibility frightened him anymore, because by now he had crossed a point from which there was no turning back. The jungle had given him enough clues to convince him the city was real, somewhere beyond endless rivers, beyond mountains hidden beneath clouds, beyond forests so dense that sunlight barely reached the ground. Something extraordinary was waiting. He could almost feel it, and with every passing expedition, he moved one step closer. As the years passed, Percy Fawcett's reputation continued to grow. He was no longer just another British officer exploring unfamiliar territory. Among geographers, he had become one of the greatest experts on South America's unexplored interior. Governments trusted his surveys. Scientific societies respected his observations. Even experienced explorers sought his advice before entering the Amazon. But despite his growing reputation, one document never left his thoughts: the mysterious manuscript 512. Whenever he returned to civilization, he found himself reading it again. Every line, every description, every forgotten detail. The document had been written nearly 2 centuries earlier by Portuguese explorers. Unlike fairy tales, it wasn't written to entertain. It read like an official expedition report, matter of fact, detailed, almost emotionless, and that made it even more convincing. It described an expedition traveling through the Brazilian interior. After weeks of hardship, the explorers supposedly reached something no one expected: an enormous abandoned stone city. The report spoke of broad avenues stretching between elegant buildings, massive arches carved from solid rock, towering columns decorated with mysterious symbols, a central square large enough to gather thousands of people. There were fountains, statues, fortified walls, even what appeared to be an ancient palace overlooking the city. The architecture resembled nothing known in Brazil. Who built it? No one knew. Where had its people gone? The manuscript offered no answer. The explorers searched for signs of life. They found none. Silence filled every street. Trees had begun swallowing the buildings. Roots split walls apart. Vines covered staircases. Nature was slowly erasing every trace of a civilization. Unable to remain because of dwindling supplies, the expedition departed. They promised to return. According to history, they never did. Most historians dismissed the account. Some argued exhaustion had caused hallucinations. Others believed unusual rock formations had been mistaken for buildings. A few suggested the report had simply been invented. Fawcett disagreed, not because he wanted to believe, because he had spent years collecting evidence. The manuscript wasn't standing alone anymore. It matched too many independent observations: pottery fragments, artificial earthworks, stories passed from one indigenous nation to another, ruined stone foundations, ancient roads disappearing beneath jungle vegetation. Individually, each clue could be explained away. Together, they painted an entirely different picture. One evening, inside his study in England, maps covered nearly every available surface. South America lay spread across his desk. Dozens of journals surrounded him. Pencils marked rivers. Colored pens identified tribal territories. Tiny handwritten notes filled the margins. For hours, he compared every known report: old missionary journals, Portuguese military records, native testimonies, previous expeditions. Slowly, certain locations began overlapping. Different witnesses, separated by decades, had unknowingly pointed toward the same general region, deep within eastern Brazil, far beyond established settlements, far beyond roads, far beyond places where Europeans normally traveled. He leaned back in silence. For perhaps the first time, he believed he wasn't chasing a legend anymore. He was narrowing down a destination. Around this time, Fawcett gave the mysterious civilization a simple name. He called it City Z. The letter meant nothing specific. It wasn't an ancient name. It wasn't taken from any indigenous language. It served only as a placeholder. until the real city revealed itself. Ironically, that single letter would become one of the most famous names in exploration history. Friends tried to reason with him. Some warned that obsession clouds judgment. Others reminded him how many expeditions had vanished into the Amazon. Several respected scientists openly criticized his theory. The rainforest could never support a city that size. The soil is too poor. The population would have starved. The manuscript cannot be trusted. Fawcett listened politely, then returned to his maps, because, unlike his critics, he had actually walked through those forests. He had seen things they never had: perfect geometric earthworks, ancient pottery buried beneath untouched jungle, unexplained stone carvings, and above all, the unwavering confidence of indigenous elders who insisted forgotten cities truly existed. One conversation stayed with him more than any other. An elderly tribal chief had looked directly into his eyes and quietly said, "The forest remembers." At first, Fawcett hadn't understood, but over the years, the meaning became clear. Human memory disappears. Books are lost. Empires collapse. Names fade away. Yet the land itself keeps its secrets. The jungle had hidden an entire civilization for centuries. Perhaps it was finally ready to reveal it. That realization changed everything. He no longer wanted to survey rivers. He no longer cared about international borders. His next expedition would have only one purpose: finding City Z, no matter how long it took, no matter how dangerous the journey became, no matter what history believed. He was convinced, somewhere beneath millions of trees, a forgotten civilization was waiting to be found. By the early 1920s, Percy Fawcett had become one of the most respected explorers in the world. Ironically, the more respected he became, the more controversial his greatest idea appeared. Most archaeologists admired his courage. They respected his surveys. His maps had helped define international borders across South America. His field observations were considered remarkably accurate. But whenever he mentioned City Z, the atmosphere changed. Smiles appeared. Eyebrows rose. Some remained politely silent. Others openly laughed. To the scientific establishment, Fawcett had crossed a dangerous line. He had allowed imagination to replace evidence. At least, that was their opinion. Many scholars insisted that no advanced civilization could ever have existed deep inside the Amazon. The rainforest, they argued, simply wouldn't allow it. The soil was poor. Heavy rains washed nutrient away. Large-scale agriculture seemed impossible. Without agriculture, there could be no cities. Without cities, there could be no forgotten empire. The conclusion appeared obvious. City Z was fantasy. Case closed. Fawcett refused to accept that conclusion, not because he was stubborn, but because he had seen too many contradictions. Again and again, he encountered enormous patches of unusually fertile black soil, rich, dark, unlike anything surrounding it. Local people had farmed those areas successfully for generations. Today, scientists call this remarkable soil terra preta, artificial earth created centuries ago by ancient inhabitants. But during Fawcett's lifetime, almost nobody understood what it meant. He suspected those fertile areas weren't natural. Someone had created them, someone with knowledge, someone capable of sustaining large populations. Another clue came from geometry. Nature is rarely perfectly symmetrical, yet during several expeditions, Fawcett discovered straight embankments extending for astonishing distances, perfect circles, rectangular formations, raised causeways. None resembled ordinary geological processes. Something intelligent had shaped the landscape, something enormous. Every expedition strengthened his conviction. Then came another surprise. Several indigenous communities spoke about abandoned roads, not animal trails, real roads, wide enough for many people to travel side by side. Some described stone foundations beneath the vegetation. Others mentioned old ceremonial centers their ancestors avoided. One elderly storyteller quietly explained, "The forest grew over the houses." Such statements fascinated Fawcett. European scholars often assumed indigenous oral traditions were unreliable. Fawcett believed exactly the opposite. He understood something many outsiders ignored. Stories passed carefully through generations often preserve remarkable historical truths. Names changed, details evolved, but the core memory survived. Perhaps the jungle wasn't hiding myths. Perhaps it was hiding history. Back in London, newspapers became increasingly interested in the mysterious explorer. Journalists loved impossible quests. Headlines spoke about forgotten kingdoms, hidden civilizations, the last great mystery on Earth. Readers were captivated. Some admired him. Others mocked him. Critics called him reckless. Dreamers called him heroic. Children imagined following his footsteps into unexplored forests. The public slowly transformed Percy Fawcett into something larger than life. He disliked the attention. He wasn't searching for fame. He wanted proof. Proof that future generations would no longer dismiss South America's forgotten past. Friends occasionally urged him to retire. He had already accomplished more than most explorers ever would. His health had suffered. Years of tropical diseases had weakened him. Repeated expeditions had exhausted both his finances and his body. He could have lived comfortably in England, written books, delivered lectures, enjoyed recognition. Instead, he spent nearly every spare moment planning another expedition, another route, another possibility, another chance. His study became almost impossible to navigate. Maps covered the walls. Boxes overflowed with notebooks. Bundles of correspondence arrived from missionaries, soldiers, rubber traders, and travelers. Every rumor mattered. Every sketch. Every forgotten diary. Every unusual artifact. He built an enormous puzzle from thousands of tiny pieces. Sometimes, late at night, he simply stared at the maps in silence, running his fingers across rivers, mountains, plateaus, trying to imagine what lay beyond the areas nobody had explored. One location kept drawing his attention, the region surrounding the headwaters of the Xingu River. Remote, almost inaccessible, protected by dense jungle. Few outsiders had ever reached it. The more he examined his evidence, the more convinced he became. If City Z existed, it would be there. By now, the search had stopped being an expedition. It had become his life's purpose. Failure no longer mattered. Ridicule no longer mattered. Even danger seemed insignificant, because somewhere deep inside, Percy Fawcett believed history itself was waiting for him, and history was about to lead him toward the journey from which he would never return. In early 1925, Percy Fawcett made a decision that would define the rest of his legacy. He would return to Brazil one final time, not for another survey, not to draw borders, not to collect observations for scientific journals. This expedition had only one objective: find City Z, or disappear trying. Unlike his earlier journeys, this mission felt different. He wasn't merely following rumors anymore. Years of exploration had narrowed the search. Countless conversations with indigenous elders, ancient reports, natural landmarks, and his own observations had all pointed toward the same region, the unexplored lands near the headwaters of the Xingu River, one of the most isolated places on Earth. Even preparing such an expedition proved enormously difficult. Every item had to be chosen carefully. There would be no opportunity to replace damaged equipment, no stores, no roads, no rescue. Everything the expedition needed had to be carried into the jungle: food, medical supplies, compasses, surveying instruments, firearms, fishing gear, cooking equipment, canvas shelters, notebooks, maps. Even extra bootlaces were considered essential. The smallest forgotten object could become the difference between life and death. Funding presented another challenge. Exploration was expensive. Transportation alone consumed large sums of money. Supplies cost even more. Some sponsors hesitated. Many believed another search for City Z would simply waste resources. But Fawcett's reputation still carried enormous weight. Eventually, enough financial support arrived. Friends congratulated him. Others quietly feared they were saying goodbye forever. His family knew the risks better than anyone. Percy had survived tropical diseases, hostile terrain, dangerous rivers, near starvation, poisonous animals. Yet each expedition seemed to demand more from him. He was now 57 years old, far older than most explorers attempting such journeys. Many wondered whether his body could endure another expedition into the Amazon. Percy himself never seemed concerned. He believed experience mattered more than youth. Years in the jungle had taught him patience, discipline, observation. He no longer fought the rainforest. He worked with it. One decision surprised almost everyone. His eldest son, Jack Fawcett, asked to join the expedition. Jack was young, strong, enthusiastic. He deeply admired his father. For years he had listened to stories about forgotten civilizations. Now, he wanted to experience the adventure himself. Many friends urged Percy to refuse. The dangers were obvious. The jungle showed no mercy to beginners. But Jack insisted. Eventually, Percy agreed. A close family friend also joined them, Rolly Rimmel, only 22 years old, intelligent, optimistic, eager for adventure. The three men formed a remarkably small expedition. Many questioned the decision. Previous Amazon expeditions often included dozens of porters, soldiers, guides, support crews. Fawcett intentionally kept his party small. He believed large groups attracted unnecessary attention, created conflict, consumed too many supplies. A compact expedition could travel faster, move more quietly, earn greater trust among indigenous communities. Whether that decision ultimately helped or doomed them would remain one of history's greatest unanswered questions. Before leaving England, Percy organized his papers with unusual care. Maps were labeled, notes sorted, letters written. Several close friends later remarked that he seemed strangely calm, almost peaceful, as though he believed he was finally approaching the answer he had spent decades pursuing. Then came one final interview. A journalist asked him what would happen if he failed. Percy smiled. Failure wasn't how he viewed exploration. Every journey revealed something. Even disappointment produced knowledge. Then the reporter asked a second question. Weren't you afraid of never coming back? For several seconds, Percy remained silent. Finally, he answered quietly, If we do not return, do not send anyone after us. The remark surprised everyone present. Some assumed he meant rescue attempts would be too dangerous. Others interpreted it differently. Perhaps he understood better than anyone what awaited beyond civilization. Perhaps he already sensed this expedition would be unlike every journey before it. In April of 1925, the three explorers sailed toward South America. Crowds gathered to watch them depart. Newspapers covered the story across Britain. Most readers believed they would eventually return, perhaps with fascinating stories, perhaps with remarkable discoveries. No one realized they were witnessing the beginning of one of history's greatest unsolved mysteries. As their ship disappeared beyond the horizon, Percy stood quietly on deck, watching England fade into the distance. He had no idea that he would never see home again. Ahead of him, beyond thousands of miles of rivers, mountains, and endless rainforest, waited either the greatest archaeological discovery of the century or the place where history itself would lose him forever. The journey into the Brazilian interior began exactly as Percy Fawcett had expected. Long days beneath a relentless sun, endless river crossings, mud that swallowed boots with every step. For weeks, the expedition moved steadily westward, traveling by boat whenever rivers allowed, walking when they didn't, occasionally hiring pack animals through small settlements before civilization disappeared completely behind them. At first, the mood remained optimistic. Jack was fascinated by everything. The immense trees, bright-colored birds flying above the canopy, strange flowers growing directly from tree trunks. Even the deafening chorus of insects after sunset amazed him. Rolly Rimmel filled notebooks with observations. He photographed villages whenever local people agreed. He carefully preserved every map Percy produced. Despite the harsh conditions, the three men laughed often. Their friendship seemed stronger than ever. Percy noticed it too. More than once, He wrote that morale remained excellent. Yet, beneath the excitement, the rainforest was quietly reminding them where they were. One afternoon, without warning, a violent tropical storm exploded overhead. Within minutes, the narrow trail disappeared beneath flowing water. Thunder echoed across the forest like cannon fire. Trees bent under powerful winds. Branches crashed around them. The expedition could do nothing except wait. Hours later, everything was soaked. Food, clothing, blankets, even carefully protected notebooks had absorbed moisture. It took days before anything felt dry again. Then came the insects. Mosquitoes appeared in impossible numbers. They attacked constantly. Morning, afternoon, night. Tiny cuts became infected almost immediately. Fever worried everyone. Even a simple illness could become deadly this far from medical help. Percy remained disciplined. Every evening, he inspected supplies personally, measured food carefully, checked navigation instruments, reviewed the next day's route. Experience had taught him something essential. The jungle punished carelessness, not bad luck. As long as discipline remained, their chances improved. Several weeks later, they encountered another indigenous community. Unlike earlier villages, these people watched silently from a distance. No one approached. No children laughed. No elders welcomed the strangers. The atmosphere felt different. Eventually, after patient gestures, a few men cautiously stepped forward. Percy offered gifts, small mirrors, fishing hooks, colored beads. The tension slowly eased. Communication remained difficult, but one message became unmistakably clear. The elders repeatedly pointed deeper into the forest, then shook their heads. Again and again. Do not go. One elderly man placed his hand over his heart, closed his eyes, then pointed toward the west. His meaning required no translation. Death. Jack quietly asked his father whether they should listen. Percy considered the warning carefully. He respected indigenous knowledge more than most explorers, but he also understood something else. Warnings often protected sacred places from outsiders. They did not necessarily indicate physical danger. He thanked the elders sincerely, then continued onward. Several days later, the expedition reached what Percy described as their final significant camp, a remote location known today as Dead Horse Camp. Years earlier, during another expedition, one of his horses had become so badly injured there that he had been forced to put it down. The name remained. Here, they rested, repaired equipment, organized supplies, prepared for the most isolated phase of the journey. Beyond this point, there would be no settlements, no reliable maps, no known European presence, only forest. Before leaving, Percy wrote one final detailed letter to his wife, Nina. His handwriting remained steady, his tone surprisingly cheerful. He explained that everything was progressing well. The expedition was healthy. Supplies remained sufficient. Morale was excellent. Most importantly, he believed they were very close to the region where City Z might finally reveal itself. Then came the sentence that would haunt historians forever. We hope to return, but we shall press on regardless. He handed the letter to trusted couriers traveling back toward civilization. It became the last confirmed communication ever received from Percy Fawcett. When the messengers disappeared downriver, the three explorers stood quietly watching them leave. None of them spoke, perhaps because they all understood the significance of that moment. From this point forward, no letters could be sent, no rescue requested, no news delivered. For the outside world, they had effectively vanished. The next morning, before sunrise, Percy folded his maps one final time. Jack adjusted his backpack. Raleigh secured the cameras and notebooks. Without ceremony, without witnesses, the three men stepped into the dense rainforest. Branches closed behind them almost immediately. Within seconds, the trail disappeared. The jungle swallowed every trace of their passage. No photograph exists of what happened next. No diary records the following days. No confirmed witness ever saw them again. Yet somewhere beyond those endless trees, one of history's greatest mysteries had just begun. Weeks passed, then months, At first, no one worried. Percy Fawcett was famous for remaining out of contact for long periods. During previous expeditions, entire seasons had passed without a single message. His family had learned to be patient. The Royal Geographical Society expected delays. Even newspapers assumed the expedition was simply moving through territory where communication was impossible. But as the months stretched on, the silence became impossible to ignore. No messenger arrived. No guide returned. No letter appeared. Nothing. It was as if the jungle had erased 3 men from existence. The last confirmed location remained Dead Horse Camp. Beyond that point, everything became speculation. Back in England, Nina Fawcett refused to believe the worst. She knew her husband better than anyone. Percy was cautious, experienced, calm under pressure. He had survived situations that would have killed most explorers. If anyone could return from the Amazon, it was him. Every morning, she hoped for a telegram. Every afternoon, she listened for unexpected visitors. Every evening, she convinced herself that tomorrow would finally bring news. Tomorrow never came. Meanwhile, rumors began spreading across South America. A rubber trader claimed he had seen 3 Englishmen traveling north. A missionary insisted local villagers had heard gunshots weeks earlier. Another traveler reported meeting a young European matching Jack Fawcett's description. Each story sounded believable. None could be confirmed. The newspapers loved it. Headlines grew increasingly dramatic. Famous explorer missing. Lost City expedition feared loss. The jungle claims another victim. Readers across Britain, Europe, and America became captivated. Percy Fawcett's disappearance was no longer simply a scientific concern. It had become an international mystery. Everyone wanted answers. Everyone had a theory. Some believed disease had struck unexpectedly. Malaria, yellow fever, or dysentery. Others suspected starvation. Supplies may have run out. A flooded river might have trapped them. One broken leg, one infected wound, could have doomed the entire expedition. Another possibility seemed even darker. Several isolated tribes fiercely defended their territory. Although Percy usually maintained peaceful relations, one misunderstanding could have turned deadly. Yet another theory refused to disappear. Perhaps they had actually found City Z. Perhaps they chose to remain. Perhaps they had discovered a hidden civilization completely isolated from the outside world. The public imagination exploded. Adventure magazines published elaborate illustrations. Novelists wrote fictional endings. Some claimed Percy had become king of a forgotten people. Others insisted he had uncovered unimaginable treasure. None of it rested on evidence. Only hope. Years passed. Still, nothing. Then came the rescue expeditions. One after another, experienced explorers entered the Amazon hoping to solve the mystery. Some searched for human remains. Others searched for abandoned camps. Several carried photographs of Percy and Jack, showing them to indigenous communities. Occasionally, someone recognized the faces, or claimed to. An elder might say, "Yes, 3 white men came through many seasons ago." Another village insisted they had traveled in the opposite direction. Some accounts contradicted one another completely. The deeper investigators looked, the more confusing the mystery became. Ironically, the search for Percy Fawcett became almost as dangerous as Fawcett's own expedition. Several rescue parties disappeared. Others lost members to disease. Some turned back after suffering heavy casualties. One expedition barely escaped starvation. Another became hopelessly lost for weeks before finding its way out. In total, historians estimate that more than 100 people either died or disappeared while attempting to discover what happened to Percy Fawcett. The Amazon seemed unwilling to surrender its secret. Each failed search only strengthened the legend. The mystery grew larger. The questions multiplied. And somewhere, hidden beneath millions of trees, the answer remained silent. Years turned into decades. The world entered a new era. Airplanes crossed continents. Wars reshaped nations. Technology transformed civilization. Yet one mystery refused to fade. What happened after Percy Fawcett, his son Jack, and Raleigh Rimmel disappeared beyond Dead Horse Camp? Did they die within days? Did they survive for months? Did they truly reach the region they believed concealed City Z? Or did they come closer than anyone had ever imagined? The jungle knew, but it wasn't ready to answer. For decades, most historians believed Percy Fawcett had simply been wrong. Brilliant, courageous, but ultimately mistaken. His mysterious City Z became a cautionary tale, an example of what could happen when an explorer allowed hope to overcome evidence. University professors repeated the same conclusion. There were never any great cities in the Amazon. The rainforest could not support them. The lost city existed only in Fawcett imagination. Case closed, or so they thought. Then, the 21st century arrived, and with it, a technology Percy Fawcett could never have imagined. Satellites, high-resolution aerial photography, laser scanning from aircraft. Scientists were suddenly able to look beneath parts of the forest canopy without cutting down a single tree. What they found shocked the archaeological world. At first, the discoveries seemed isolated. Perfect circles carved into the landscape, massive squares, straight roads extending for kilometers, artificial canals, raised platforms. The geometric precision was unmistakable. Nature had not created these structures. Human beings had. As more regions were scanned, the discoveries multiplied. Entire networks of ancient settlements began emerging from beneath the forest. Some covered hundreds of square kilometers. Others were connected by wide roads stretching in perfectly straight lines. Sophisticated irrigation systems appeared. Defensive walls, ceremonial plazas, residential districts, engineered landscapes. This wasn't a handful of isolated villages. It was something much larger, something organized, exactly the kind of civilization Percy Fawcett had spent decades searching for. Archaeologists were stunned. For nearly a century, the dominant theory had been wrong. The Amazon had not always been an untouched wilderness. Millions of people may once have lived there. Recent studies suggested enormous populations had transformed the forest itself. They planted useful trees, managed rivers, built roads, created fertile soils. Even today, many sections of rainforest still contain unusually high concentrations of fruit and nut trees planted centuries ago by forgotten civilizations. The forest was not entirely natural. It had been shaped by human hands. Researchers studying Terra Preta reached similar conclusions. The mysterious black soil that had fascinated Fawcett was no accident. Ancient inhabitants had deliberately engineered it, mixing charcoal, organic waste, broken pottery, and plant material over generations. The result was astonishing. Rich, fertile earth capable of supporting intensive agriculture for centuries. Exactly what critics once insisted was impossible. Suddenly, one by one, the arguments against Fawcett began collapsing. The soil is too poor. Wrong. There could never have been enough food. Wrong. There were never large populations. Wrong. Everything he had suspected, modern science was beginning to confirm. Not every detail, not every theory, but the central idea that sophisticated civilizations had flourished deep within the Amazon was becoming increasingly undeniable. Then came another breakthrough. Researchers using LIDAR, a laser mapping technology capable of penetrating dense vegetation, discovered vast urban complexes hidden beneath forests across South America. Entire cities, invisible from ground level, appeared on computer screens. Road systems connected neighborhoods. Massive ceremonial centers occupied strategic locations. Reservoirs stored water. Terraces supported agriculture. Engineers, architects, farmers, builders, all had once lived where historians insisted almost no one could survive. The irony was impossible to ignore. Nearly 100 years earlier, Percy Fawcett had reached the same conclusion, using nothing more than careful observation, conversations with indigenous peoples, ancient manuscripts, and relentless determination. He never possessed satellite imagery. He never saw laser scans. He never benefited from modern archaeology. Yet, somehow, he sensed the truth before science could prove it. That realization transformed his reputation. Historians no longer dismissed him as merely an eccentric explorer. Today, Many view Percy Fawcett as a man decades ahead of his time, not because he found City Z, but because he correctly understood something almost everyone else refused to believe. The Amazon had a forgotten history, a history still waiting to be uncovered. And perhaps, somewhere among those newly discovered settlements, lay the answer to the mystery that consumed his life. Had Percy come closer than anyone realized? Closer than even he himself knew? The evidence was beginning to suggest the answer might be yes. By the time modern archaeology began confirming that advanced civilizations had once flourished across the Amazon, one question still remained unanswered. If Percy Fawcett had been right about the existence of those forgotten societies, what had happened to him? Nearly a century after his disappearance, no confirmed grave has ever been found. No verified journal, no camera, no final campsite, only fragments, rumor, and theories. Some are grounded in evidence. Others belong more to legend than history. Yet each one reveals just how mysterious Fawcett's final journey truly was. The first, and perhaps most widely accepted, theory is that the expedition encountered a hostile indigenous group. To many people, this explanation seems obvious. The Amazon was home to numerous isolated communities. Some had suffered terrible violence at the hands of rubber traders, miners, and outsiders. As a result, certain tribes attacked strangers immediately, not out of cruelty, but out of survival. At first glance, it sounds convincing. However, there is an important complication. Percy Fawcett had spent nearly 20 years building peaceful relationships with indigenous peoples. Unlike many explorers of his era, he never entered villages firing weapons. He discouraged violence whenever possible. He believed respect opened more doors than force ever could. Many tribal communities welcomed him because of that attitude. Several later described him as patient, calm, and unusually willing to listen. Could one encounter still have turned tragic? Certainly. A misunderstanding, an accidental trespass, or contact with an unfamiliar group could have changed everything. But historians have never found conclusive proof. The second theory focuses on disease. Even today, the Amazon remains one of the world's most demanding environments. In 1925, medical treatment inside the rainforest was almost non-existent. Malaria, yellow fever, typhoid, dysentery, severe infections, any one of them could become fatal within days. If Jack or Raleigh had fallen seriously ill, Percy almost certainly would have refused to abandon them. Their progress would have slowed. Food supplies would have disappeared faster. Eventually, the jungle itself might have finished what disease had begun. Again, the theory is plausible, but it explains only how they may have died, not why absolutely no confirmed trace has ever emerged. The third theory is starvation. Although the expedition carried carefully measured provisions, food in the rainforest could never be guaranteed. Fishing depended on rivers. Game was unpredictable. Heavy rains often destroyed supplies. If they became lost, weeks could pass before they realized they were moving in circles. One wrong navigation decision could slowly become irreversible. History offers many examples of experienced explorers dying only a few kilometers from safety. The jungle does not forgive small mistakes, especially when every direction looks almost identical. Then comes perhaps the most fascinating possibility. What if Percy actually reached the region he had been searching for? Some researchers believe the expedition may have entered territories occupied by previously unknown communities. Not hostile, simply isolated. According to scattered oral traditions collected decades later, 3 white men were seen living among indigenous groups far deeper inside the forest than anyone expected. Most accounts appeared many years after the disappearance. None could be independently verified. Some contradicted each other completely, yet they never disappeared entirely. Several elders insisted the strangers had remained willingly. Others claimed illness prevented them from leaving. A few stories suggested only one survivor lived beyond the first months. No evidence has ever confirmed these accounts. Still, they continue to intrigue historians. Another mystery involved objects supposedly linked to Fawcett. Over the decades, compasses, metal tools, bones, personal belongings. Even rings allegedly belonging to members of the expedition surfaced from time to time. Each discovery generated headlines. Each promised to solve the mystery, and one after another, they failed verification. Either the objects lacked reliable provenance, or scientific analysis disproved the connection. The mystery survived every claim. Perhaps the strangest theory of all emerged from popular imagination. Some believed Percy had deliberately disappeared, that after discovering City Z, he chose never to return. The idea inspired novels, adventure films, radio dramas, even comic books. It captured the imagination of millions, but historians remain skeptical. Nothing in Percy's writing suggests he intended to abandon his family, especially Nina. Their correspondence reveals deep affection. His final letters speak repeatedly of returning home. He fully expected to complete the expedition. The tragedy, if there was one, almost certainly unfolded unexpectedly. As decades passed, one uncomfortable truth became increasingly clear. The Amazon is extraordinarily efficient at reclaiming what enters it. Wood rots, metal rusts, clothing disappears, buildings collapse, trails vanish within months. Entire camps can become indistinguishable from untouched forest. If 3 exhausted explorers perished in a remote valley, nature could erase nearly every trace in remarkably little time. That possibility haunts investigators, because it means the answer may have existed all along, hidden beneath leaves, roots, and soil, waiting patiently while the forest protected its secret. Yet, perhaps, the greatest irony is this. For almost 100 years, people searched for Percy Fawcett, the very man who had spent his own life searching for someone else, for an unknown civilization, lost beneath the jungle. In the end, the hunter became the mystery, and history continued searching for both. Although Percy Fawcett never returned from the Amazon, his journey did not end in 1925. In many ways, it had only just begun. For years after his disappearance, people remembered him primarily as the explorer who vanished while chasing an impossible dream. But slowly, something remarkable happened. A new generation of explorers began reading his journals, not searching for treasure, but studying the way he thought. Unlike many adventurers of his era, Fawcett was never obsessed with gold. He rarely spoke about riches. What fascinated him was knowledge. He wanted to understand the people who had lived before recorded history. He believed every civilization deserved to be remembered, even if it had disappeared centuries earlier. That philosophy made him very different from many 19th century explorers. As archaeologists revisited his notebooks, they noticed something surprising. His observations were extraordinarily careful. He recorded rivers with precision. He documented vegetation. He described soil. He paid close attention to indigenous traditions. Most importantly, he never dismissed local knowledge simply because it lacked written records. That attitude now seems obvious, but in his own time, it was revolutionary. Many researchers today openly acknowledge that indigenous oral history has preserved countless archaeological clues, exactly as Fawcett believed. As decades passed, his influence spread beyond science. Novelists became fascinated by his disappearance. Adventure writers borrowed elements of his expeditions, hidden cities, ancient civilizations, dangerous jungles, maps leading to forgotten worlds. Many historians believe that explorers like Percy Fawcett helped inspire fictional adventurers who later became cultural icons, although no single character was based entirely on him. His courage, his determination, and his relentless pursuit of impossible discoveries became part of popular imagination. Readers around the world fell in love with stories about explorers refusing to surrender. Film directors soon followed. Movies filled with mysterious temples, lost civilizations, and forgotten maps echoed themes remarkably similar to Fawcett's real-life expeditions. The line between history and legend slowly blurred. Ironically, the real story remained even more extraordinary, because unlike fictional heroes, Percy received no dramatic ending, no final speech, no triumphant return, only silence. His family continued hoping for answers, especially Nina. For decades, She defended her husband's reputation. Whenever critics mocked City Z, she reminded them of his extraordinary record. She knew he had not been reckless. He had been methodical, patient, disciplined. She believed history would eventually vindicate him. Time proved her right. Modern archaeology transformed the conversation. Each newly discovered settlement hidden beneath the rainforest strengthened the central idea Percy had defended throughout his life. The Amazon had once supported complex societies, not isolated villages alone, but interconnected populations capable of engineering landscapes on a massive scale. Researchers who once dismissed such possibilities began publishing entirely new interpretations. The rainforest itself became evidence. Ancient roads, artificial lakes, geometric earthworks, engineered forests. Everything pointed toward a forgotten human story. Percy had not imagined an impossible civilization. He had simply reached the correct conclusion long before the necessary technology existed to prove it. That realization restored his reputation. Today, many historians describe him not as an eccentric dreamer, but as a visionary observer, a man whose greatest strength was his willingness to question accepted knowledge. He understood something timeless. Consensus is not the same as truth. Sometimes, entire generations can believe something and still be wrong. History has shown this repeatedly. Continents once believed impossible were eventually mapped. Species thought extinct were rediscovered. Ancient cities dismissed as myths emerged from beneath deserts, mountains, and forests. Fawcett understood that possibility better than almost anyone. He accepted uncertainty. He welcomed mystery. He believed unanswered questions deserved investigation, not ridicule. Perhaps that is why his story continues captivating people a century later. Because deep inside, most of us want to believe there are still discoveries waiting beyond the horizon, places not yet understood, stories not yet told, truths hidden beneath layers of time. Percy dedicated his entire life to that belief. Whether or not he ever stood inside the city he imagined, his greatest discovery may have been something even larger. He reminded the world that curiosity itself changes history. And sometimes, the people willing to ask impossible questions become the reason future generations finally find the answers. For nearly a century, City Z remained nothing more than a question, an idea, a possibility, something suspended between history and legend. Then, the jungle began revealing its secrets, not because it wanted to, but because technology had finally become powerful enough to see what human eyes never could. For generations, archaeologists had searched the Amazon on foot. Every expedition faced the same obstacle, the rainforest canopy. Towering trees blocked almost everything from view. Even standing only a few hundred meters away, researchers could walk past ancient ruins without ever realizing they were there. The forest had become nature's perfect camouflage. Entire civilizations disappeared beneath roots, leaves, and centuries of growth. Then came LiDAR, light detection and ranging, an extraordinary technology capable of firing millions of laser pulses toward the ground from aircraft. Most of those beams struck leaves, branches, vines, but enough reached the forest floor. Computers filtered away the vegetation, leaving behind something astonishing, the land itself. For the first time, researchers could see the true shape of landscapes hidden beneath dense rainforest. The first scan surprised everyone. The next one shocked the scientific community. Perfect geometric formations appeared everywhere. Large squares, massive circles, straight avenues stretching for kilometers, artificial terraces, defensive walls, water reservoirs, entire neighborhoods. The discoveries weren't isolated. They formed networks, connected by carefully engineered roads. Some roads measured nearly 20 meters wide. Others extended for astonishing distances through terrain previously considered untouched wilderness. No natural process creates roads that perfectly straight. Someone had planned them. Someone had built them. Someone had maintained them. And someone had lived there. The scale changed everything. Researchers realized they weren't looking at individual settlements. They were seeing organized societies, cities connected to villages, villages connected to ceremonial centers, entire regional systems hidden beneath the forest. Exactly the kind of civilization Percy Fawcett believed must have existed. One discovery followed another. Brazil, Bolivia, Peru, Ecuador. Each country revealed new evidence. Some settlements appeared capable of supporting tens of thousands of inhabitants. Others controlled extensive agricultural landscapes, engineered fish ponds, raised farming platforms, canal systems, causeways elevated above seasonal floods. Nothing resembled the primitive image long associated with ancient Amazonian peoples. Instead, the evidence revealed sophisticated environmental engineering. These civilizations hadn't conquered the forest. They had learned to live with it. Instead of destroying nature, they reshaped it carefully. Useful trees were planted intentionally, waterways redirected, soils enriched. The rainforest itself became part of the city. An astonishing idea emerged. Perhaps the Amazon wasn't originally an untouched wilderness. Perhaps much of what modern visitors considered natural forest had actually been influenced by human activity over thousands of years. Even today, scientists continue discovering unusual concentrations of Brazil nut trees, palm species, fruit-bearing plants, all growing where ancient populations once lived. Some forests may actually be enormous abandoned gardens. The implications were extraordinary. Percy had never claimed the Amazon contained cities identical to Rome, or Athens, or Babylon. He imagined something adapted to its environment, something unique. Modern archaeology now agrees. The civilizations hidden beneath the rainforest developed differently from those of Europe or Asia. Their buildings often combined earth, wood, stone, and water management. Time erased much of the wood. Rain softened exposed earth. Vegetation reclaimed abandoned spaces. Yet beneath everything, the city's skeleton remained, waiting, patiently, for someone to notice. Researchers often compare the process to assembling an enormous puzzle. Every new LiDAR scan adds another piece. Every excavation confirms another prediction. Every discovery raises new questions. How many people actually live there? Why were the cities abandoned? Did disease spread before Europeans even arrived? Did climate change alter the region? Or did political collapse slowly empty the settlements? Many answers remain unknown, but one conclusion grows stronger every year. The Amazon's history is far richer than anyone imagined during Percy Fawcett's lifetime. Perhaps the explorer never found the exact city he called City Z. Perhaps that particular place still waits beneath untouched forest. Or perhaps City Z was never a single city at all. Perhaps it represented an entire forgotten world, a network of civilizations stretching across thousands of kilometers. If so, Percy had been searching for something even greater than he realized. Not one lost city, but an entire chapter of human history. A chapter that modern science is only beginning to read. As modern researchers overlaid Percy Fawcett's original maps onto satellite imagery, something remarkable began to emerge. His routes, drawn more than a century earlier with compass, notebook, and determination, passed astonishingly close to several regions where archaeologists have now confirmed the existence of ancient settlements. No one could know this in 1925. There were no aerial photographs, no satellites, no laser scanners. Only rivers, mountains, the stars, and instinct. Yet somehow, again and again, Fawcett's intuition guided him toward places that modern science now considers among the most archaeologically important areas of the Amazon. That realization changed how historians viewed his final expedition. Perhaps he wasn't wandering blindly. Perhaps he was following clues so subtle that only years of experience could recognize them. He often paid attention to things other explorers ignored. The color of the soil, the shape of hills, unusual tree species growing together, fragment of pottery exposed after heavy rain, artificial embankments barely visible beneath vegetation. To an ordinary traveler, these details meant nothing. To Percy, they were signs, evidence that human hands had once transformed the landscape. Modern archaeology has confirmed that ancient Amazonian civilizations often selected elevated terrain near rivers. They engineered drainage systems, built ceremonial centers on carefully chosen plateaus, created fertile agricultural zones nearby. Without realizing it, Percy had begun identifying exactly those same environmental patterns decades before scientists understood why they mattered. Several contemporary archaeologists have remarked on this extraordinary coincidence, not because Fawcett possessed supernatural insight, but because he possessed something increasingly rare: patience. He observed before reaching conclusions. He listened before speaking. He allowed the landscape itself to teach him. That approach often produced remarkably accurate instincts. One detail from his journals continues to fascinate researchers today. On several occasions, Percy described sections of forest that felt different. The vegetation changed unexpectedly. The terrain became unusually flat. Fruit-bearing trees appeared in concentrations that seemed unnatural. Animal activity increased. The soil darkened beneath his boots. Today, scientists recognize many of those exact characteristics as possible indicators of ancient human occupation. Large populations reshaped ecosystems. Even centuries after abandonment, the forest remembers, not through buildings alone, but through biology itself, the distribution of plants, the chemistry of the soil, the movement of water. Everything carries echoes of those who lived there. Percy sensed that long before laboratories could measure it. Another fascinating clue involves roads. Throughout his expeditions, he repeatedly mentioned unusually straight pathways hidden beneath vegetation. Some critics dismissed these descriptions. Natural clearings, they argued, animal trails, wishful thinking. Modern LiDAR surveys tell a different story. Ancient causeways, many extending for kilometers, have now been identified across several Amazonian regions. Some connected ceremonial complexes. Others linked farming districts with residential areas. Several remain almost perfectly straight despite centuries of forest growth. Exactly as Percy described. Could he have walked across one without fully recognizing its scale? It seems entirely possible. Dense jungle limits visibility to only a few meters. A traveler standing on an ancient road might never realize it once stretched for miles. Only from above does the complete design become visible. There is another possibility that historians often discuss. Perhaps Percy reached the outer edge of a forgotten civilization without ever reaching its center. Imagine searching for an ancient city buried beneath one of the largest forests on Earth, finding scattered pottery, artificial soil, raised earthworks, engineered vegetation, small abandoned settlements. Every discovery would suggest something much larger lay ahead, and perhaps it did. But the rainforest offers no distant skyline, no towers rising above the trees. Everything remains hidden until you stand directly beside it. If disease, exhaustion, or simple misfortune interrupted the expedition, Percy might have come astonishingly close without ever realizing how near success truly was. That possibility is both heartbreaking and inspiring because it reminds us how exploration often works. History rarely unfolds in one dramatic moment. Great discoveries emerge piece by piece, generation after generation. One explorer notices unusual soil, another uncovers pottery, a third maps ancient roads. Decades later, scientists assemble those fragments into a complete picture. No single person solves the mystery alone. Each contributes one chapter. Percy Fawcett may never have uncovered City Z, but he asked a question that inspired countless others to continue searching. Without that question, many modern discoveries might never have happened. His greatest contribution wasn't necessarily finding a lost civilization. It was convincing the world that one might exist. Sometimes, the person who changes history isn't the one who reaches a destination. It's the one who persuades everyone else that the journey is worth taking. And in that sense, Percy Fawcett succeeded beyond anything he could have imagined. When Percy Fawcett disappeared, most people assumed the mystery would eventually solve itself. Someone would discover an abandoned campsite, a journal, a weapon, perhaps even a grave. But years passed, then decades. Nothing appeared. Instead, something unexpected happened. The mystery itself became an irresistible challenge. Explorers from around the world began asking the same question. What if we simply follow Fawcett's route? At first, the idea seemed reasonable. His journal survived. His map still existed. His last confirmed campsite was known. Surely someone could retrace his footsteps. They quickly learned a painful lesson. The Amazon Percy had entered no longer looked exactly the same. The rainforest never stands still. A trail used 1 year may disappear completely the next. Entire riverbanks collapse during seasonal floods. Trees hundreds of years old fall across forgotten paths. New vegetation grows so quickly that within months, the forest can erase every sign that a human being ever passed through. Try to follow Fawcett's route was like trying to follow footprints across moving water. One expedition after another entered the jungle. Some were funded by newspapers, others by museums. A few were organized by wealthy adventurers fascinated by the legend. Each believed they would succeed where everyone else had failed. Each carried copies of Fawcett's notes. Each compared rivers, mountain ridges, and indigenous accounts. Yet almost immediately, problems began. One river described by Fawcett had changed course. Another had become almost impossible to navigate. Bridges made from fallen trees had long since rotted away. Entire valleys looked different after years of erosion. Even experienced guides admitted that parts of the landscape no longer matched historical descriptions. Then came the jungle itself. Many rescuers underestimated it. They believed modern equipment would solve everything. But technology cannot eliminate exhaustion. It cannot prevent tropical diseases. It cannot stop relentless humidity from damaging supplies. Nor can it make food appear when hunting fails. Several expeditions became hopelessly disoriented. Compasses behaved unpredictably near certain mineral deposits. Clouds blocked celestial navigation for days. Dense vegetation reduced visibility to only a few meters. It became frighteningly easy to walk in circles. One rescue party later admitted they unknowingly crossed their own trail 3 different times before realizing they had gone nowhere. Others never returned. As astonishing as it sounds, the search for Percy Fawcett claimed additional lives. Some historians estimate that more than 100 people either died or disappeared while attempting to uncover his fate, not because they lacked courage, but because they underestimated the rainforest. The Amazon does not distinguish between explorer, scientist, journalist, or rescuer. It demands the same respect from everyone. One particularly determined expedition believed it had finally uncovered the truth. Members discovered scattered bones deep inside the forest. Excitement spread rapidly. Newspapers announced that Percy Fawcett had finally been found. Experts examined the remains. Families prepared themselves for long-awaited answers. Then forensic analysis reached an unexpected conclusion. The bones belonged to someone else. The mystery remained. Years later, another group claimed they had discovered artifacts connected to Jack Fawcett. Again, hope surged. Again, scientific investigation failed to confirm the story. The pattern repeated itself countless times. A compass, a knife, a piece of metal, fragments of clothing. Every object generated enormous excitement. Every object promised closure. Almost every claim collapsed under careful examination. Yet none of these failures discouraged future explorers. If anything, they strengthened the legend, because every unsuccessful expedition proved something Percy himself had understood decades earlier. The Amazon was far larger than most people imagined. Even today, large portions remain extraordinarily difficult to explore. There are valleys almost no outsiders have visited, forests where satellite images reveal unusual formations that no archaeological team has yet examined, remote regions where isolated indigenous peoples continue living with minimal outside contact. The mystery survives partly because the landscape itself still protects it. Modern researchers often compare the Amazon to an enormous library. Millions of pages remain unread. Some chapters have already been opened. Others are still sealed beneath vegetation. Percy Fawcett entered that library carrying little more than courage, maps, and curiosity. Those who followed him carried better equipment, more knowledge, and superior technology. Yet many return with the same realization. The jungle reveals only what it chooses to reveal. Perhaps that explains why Percy Fawcett's disappearance continues captivating the world. Because unlike most historical mysteries, this one still feels alive. Every archaeological discovery, every newly mapped valley, every unexplored plateau raises the same haunting possibility. Perhaps the answer has been waiting there all along, hidden just beyond the next ridge, beyond the next river, beyond the next wall of ancient trees, patiently waiting for someone to look in exactly the right place. History has a curious way of rewarding patience. Sometimes not during a person's lifetime, but generations later. Percy Fawcett spent decades trying to convince the world that the Amazon concealed the remains of forgotten civilizations. He died without proving it. Today, scientists continue uncovering evidence that would have astonished him. One of the most remarkable discoveries involves something almost invisible to the casual observer, the shape of the land itself. When archaeologists began studying satellite imagery alongside LiDAR scans, they noticed enormous geometric earthwork spread across thousands of square kilometers. Perfect circles, massive squares, octagons, long defensive walls, straight avenues intersecting at carefully planned angles. These structures were not random. Someone had designed them. Someone had measured them. Someone had coordinated hundreds, perhaps thousands, of workers to build them. Many of these earthworks had remained hidden for centuries, not because they were deeply buried, but because forests had quietly grown over them. The jungle became their greatest protector. As trees expanded, roots stabilized ancient embankments. Leaves covered roads. Centuries passed. The cities simply disappeared beneath green. Then came another extraordinary discovery. Researchers excavating several settlements uncovered enormous quantities of pottery, not crude containers made by isolated villages, but carefully crafted ceramics, decorated with intricate patterns, produced in astonishing numbers. Some sites revealed evidence of specialized craftsmanship. Certain communities appear to focus on ceramics, others on agriculture, others on ceremonial architecture. It suggested something historians had long believed impossible: division of labor, large populations, organized societies, civilization. Excavations also uncovered sophisticated drainage systems. Canals redirected seasonal floods. Raised agricultural fields prevented crops from drowning during heavy rains. Artificial ponds supplied fish throughout the year. Reservoirs stored precious water during dry seasons. These were not desperate survival techniques. They reflected careful planning, engineering, experience accumulated across generations, exactly the qualities required to support permanent urban life. Another discovery fascinated environmental scientists. The forest itself seemed strangely ordered. At first, researchers assumed nature alone determined where different tree species grew. Then they noticed unusual patterns. Brazil nut trees frequently appeared near ancient settlements. So did palms, fruit-bearing species, medicinal plants. Many forests contained concentrations far too regular to be accidental. Ancient inhabitants had deliberately planted them, generation after generation. The rainforest had become a living garden, an enormous cultivated landscape that continued growing long after its creators disappeared. Imagine standing in a forest today, believing it has always been untouched wilderness, while unknowingly walking through an orchard planted nearly 1,000 years ago. That possibility transformed archaeology. The Amazon was no longer viewed merely as a place where humans survived. It became a place humans actively shaped, exactly as Percy had suspected. Then researchers began estimating population sizes. Earlier generations believed perhaps a few 100,000 people had inhabited the Amazon before European contact. Modern estimates are dramatically different. Some scholars now suggest that millions may once have lived throughout the basin, entire regional networks connected by trade, shared technologies, ceremonial traditions, agricultural innovation. No single enormous empire, but numerous complex societies interacting across vast distances. Suddenly, the idea of a lost city seemed almost too small. Percy may have imagined one extraordinary settlement. Reality appears even more astonishing. There may have been dozens, perhaps hundreds, each adapted perfectly to its surrounding environment, each contributing to an enormous human landscape hidden beneath what later generations mistakenly considered untouched wilderness. Yet despite all these discoveries, one mystery remains. No archaeological team has definitively identified the exact place Percy imagined as City Z. Some believe it never existed as one specific city. Others argue its ruins are still waiting beneath unexplored forest. And some think Percy unknowingly combined evidence from multiple civilizations into a single vision. Whatever the truth, one fact has become undeniable. He was searching in the right world, not a mythical one, a real one, a forgotten one. Every year, new excavations reveal additional settlements. New LiDAR surveys expose more roads. New discoveries expand the map of ancient Amazonian civilization. With each announcement, historians quietly move one step closer to conclusion Percy reached using nothing more than observation, patience, and belief. He never lived to witness his greatest vindication, but history finally did. There's an old saying among explorers: the greatest discoveries are often made by those willing to be wrong. Percy Fawcett understood that better than most. Throughout his life, he accepted something many scholars struggle to accept. That accepted knowledge could be incomplete, not because previous generations lacked intelligence, but because they lacked evidence. In the early 20th century, the world's understanding of the Amazon was astonishingly limited. Maps still contained enormous blank spaces. Entire river systems remained poorly documented. Countless indigenous nations had never been studied from the perspective of European science. The rainforest was simply too vast, too hostile, too mysterious. Many experts concluded that because they had found no great civilizations, none had ever existed. Percy reached a different conclusion. He believed absence of evidence was not evidence of absence. That single idea changed everything. Although he vanished before proving his theory, his determination inspired others to keep asking the same question. Could history have overlooked something enormous? For decades, the answer seemed to be no. Then, modern archaeology began uncovering one forgotten settlement after another. Researchers who had once dismissed Fawcett's ideas now found themselves investigating questions remarkably similar to his own, not because they wanted to honor him, but because the evidence demanded it. Science had changed, not because Percy insisted, because reality insisted. One of the most remarkable aspects of his legacy is how modern researchers approach indigenous knowledge. During Fawcett's lifetime, many explorers believed local traditions held little scientific value. Percy disagreed. Whenever he entered a village, he listened patiently. He asked elders about old roads, ancient places, abandoned settlements, sacred hills, stories passed down through generations. He understood something that archaeology now embraces. Memory survives in many forms, not only through books, but through language, ceremony, place names, oral history. Modern archaeological teams frequently collaborate with indigenous communities before beginning excavations. Many of the most significant discoveries in recent decades began with conversations, not satellite images. Exactly as Percy had practiced nearly a century earlier, his methods, once considered unusual, now appear surprisingly modern. Another lesson emerged from his expeditions: respect. Unlike many explorers of his era, Percy rarely described the rainforest as an enemy to conquer. He understood that survival depended upon humility. The jungle was stronger than any individual. Anyone entering it without respect would almost certainly fail. That philosophy influenced generations of field researchers. Today, successful Amazon expeditions rely heavily upon cooperation with local guides, environmental understanding, careful planning, patience, not brute force. In many ways, Percy anticipated this approach decades before it became standard practice. Then there is perhaps his greatest contribution of all: curiosity. He reminded the scientific world that difficult questions deserve investigation, even when the answers appear impossible. Imagine if every explorer had accepted the consensus of their time. No one would have searched for Troy. No one would have excavated Machu Picchu. No one would have looked beneath the deserts of Egypt for forgotten cities. History advances because someone is willing to ask, what if everyone is mistaken? Percy asked exactly that question about the Amazon. His critics laughed. History eventually answered. Today, university courses discuss ancient Amazonian civilizations. Scientific journals publish discoveries almost every year. Researchers continue mapping settlements hidden beneath dense forests. Everything Percy hoped future generations would investigate, they are now studying in extraordinary detail. Of course, many mysteries remain. No one knows the exact political systems governing those civilizations. Their languages remain largely unknown. Their beliefs, their art, their daily lives still hide beneath layers of earth waiting to be uncovered. Perhaps the greatest discoveries have not yet been made. Perhaps, somewhere, a team of archaeologists is preparing an expedition that will uncover the very settlement Percy dreamed about. Or perhaps, City Z has already been found, not as one magnificent metropolis, but as dozens of interconnected communities slowly emerging from beneath the rainforest. Either possibility honors his vision, because Percy never searched merely for stone buildings. He searched for forgotten people, people history had accidentally erased. Thanks to modern archaeology, those people are finally returning to history. And so, in a quiet, unexpected way, the explorer, who disappeared into the jungle, succeeded, not because he returned, not because he held the ruins in his hands, but because he convinced the world that they were worth searching for. There is something timeless about a mystery. Long after the names of kings have faded, long after empires have risen and fallen, a single unanswered question can continue captivating the human imagination. Perhaps that is why, nearly 100 years after Percy Fawcett vanished into the Amazon, people still speak his name, not because he conquered a continent, not because he discovered unimaginable riches, but because he refused to stop asking a question. What if history had forgotten something extraordinary? That question has driven explorers for centuries. Christopher Columbus sailed into an ocean many believed could not be crossed. Howard Carter searched endlessly for a tomb many experts insisted had already been looted. Hiram Bingham climbed into Peruvian mountains until he reached the forgotten terraces of Machu Picchu. Again and again, history rewarded those willing to look where others refused. Of course, not every search ends in triumph. Many explorers spend entire lifetimes chasing places they never found. Some search for El Dorado, others for Atlantis, others for the Northwest Passage. Dreams often survive longer than the people pursuing them, yet even unsuccessful expeditions leave something behind. Maps, observations, questions, ideas. Each becomes part of humanity's collective search for understanding. Percy Fawcett belonged to that tradition. He understood that exploration was never simply about reaching a destination. It was about expanding the limits of what people believed possible. Every expedition added another piece to humanity's understanding of the world. Sometimes, the greatest contribution came from a failed journey. Imagine if Percy had remained in England. Imagine if he had accepted the opinion of experts who insisted no great civilization had ever existed within the Amazon. Perhaps modern archaeology would still have reached the same conclusions, eventually, but perhaps it would have taken much longer. Perhaps fewer people would have dared to investigate. Sometimes, one determined voice is enough to keep an impossible idea alive until evidence finally appears. That may have been Percy's greatest achievement. He kept the question alive. Modern explorers often speak about something called the explorer's paradox. The closer you come to understanding a place, the more you realize how much remains unknown. Every discovery creates new mysteries. Every answer raises fresh questions. The Amazon illustrates this perfectly. Each year, researchers uncover another forgotten settlement, another ceremonial center, another network of ancient roads. Yet each discovery reveals just how much remains hidden beneath the forest. It is entirely possible that future generations will uncover cities far larger than anything known today. Civilizations whose names have completely disappeared from memory. Languages no one has spoken for centuries. Entire chapters of human history still waiting beneath the trees. That possibility reminds us of something profound. History is not finished. People often imagine archaeology as the study of the past. In reality, it is equally the study of the future, because every excavation changes tomorrow's understanding of yesterday. Percy understood that instinctively. He wasn't trying to preserve old stories. He was trying to discover new truths. There is another reason his story continues to resonate. His journey represents something deeply human, the willingness to pursue meaning even when success is uncertain. Every scientist recognizes that feeling. Every inventor, every artist, every writer, every person who has devoted years to a dream others considered impossible. The destination matters, but the pursuit changes the traveler. Percy entered the Amazon searching for a city. Along the way, he transformed into something else, a symbol, not of certainty, but of curiosity, of perseverance, of intellectual courage. He accepted ridicule, isolation, physical hardship, not because he enjoyed suffering, but because he believed truth deserved the effort. Perhaps that is why, even today, his disappearance feels strangely secondary. The mystery of his fate fascinates us, but his life inspires us, because while the jungle may have hidden his final footsteps, it could never erase the question he asked. Could there still be forgotten worlds waiting beyond the edge of what we know? Modern archaeology has already answered yes, and somewhere beyond the next expedition, the next excavation, or the next breakthrough in technology, another forgotten chapter of history may already be waiting. Just as Percy Fawcett always believed, there was a time when the world still contained blank spaces, entire regions where maps ended and imagination began. To people living in great cities, those empty spaces represented mystery. To explorers, they represented possibility. Percy Fawcett belonged to the last generation that could still walk into a place where almost nothing had been documented, a place where every river bend, every mountain, every conversation with an indigenous elder could reveal something the outside world had never known. Today, it is easy to believe those days are over. After all, satellites circle the Earth, drones fly over forests, artificial intelligence analyzes landscapes from space. Surely, there are no more great mysteries left. But reality tells a different story. Scientists estimate that vast portions of the Amazon remain only partially understood, not because no one has seen them, but because seeing is not the same as understanding. Every year, researchers identify archaeological sites hidden beneath vegetation. Every year, previously unknown earthworks appear in satellite imagery. Every year, new discoveries force historians to rewrite what they believed about the ancient world. The greatest surprise is not that civilizations existed there. It is how advanced they truly were. Many built enormous ceremonial centers. Others engineered complex systems for managing seasonal floods. Some transformed infertile ground into productive farmland that remains fertile even after hundreds of years. None of these achievements fit the old narrative. For generations, history books described the Amazon as an almost untouched wilderness before European arrival. Modern evidence paints a far more fascinating picture. The rainforest was alive with human innovation. Communities traded, farmed, built, adapted, thrived. Then, for reasons still debated, many disappeared. Disease introduced after European contact almost certainly played a devastating role. Entire populations collapsed before outsiders even documented their existence. Cities were abandoned. Roads vanished beneath vegetation. Names disappeared from memory. Within only a few generations, the forest reclaimed nearly everything. Imagine future archaeologists discovering New York, but only after 1,000 years of uninterrupted forest growth. Concrete reduced to fragments, steel consumed by rust, roads hidden beneath roots, without written records. How difficult would it be to reconstruct what once existed? That challenge gives us a new appreciation for Percy Fawcett. He attempted something almost impossible. He tried to recognize and erase civilization, using only scattered clues, fragments of pottery, ancient stories, changes in vegetation, unusual landscapes. By themselves, none proved anything. Together, they hinted at a forgotten world. Perhaps that is why modern archaeologists still admire him, not because every conclusion proved correct. Science rarely works that way, but because he noticed patterns others ignored. He remained curious where others became certain. That distinction changed everything. History repeatedly teaches the same lesson. Certainty ages poorly. Curiosity endures. Every generation believes it has nearly finished discovering the world. Every generation eventually learns how much remains hidden. The oceans still conceal thousands of unexplored shipwrecks. Mountain caves continue revealing unknown human ancestors. Deserts uncover forgotten kingdoms. Ice preserves ancient civilizations. And beneath one of the largest forests on Earth, entire chapters of human history continue waiting quietly beneath layers of leaves and soil. Percy never lived to witness that extraordinary realization, but perhaps he sensed it. Perhaps every difficult expedition strengthened a quiet conviction inside him that the jungle wasn't empty, only silent. There's an important difference. An empty place contains nothing. A silent place may simply be waiting for someone who knows how to listen. Percy spent his entire life listening to rivers, to landscapes, to forgotten manuscripts, to indigenous elders whose stories many scholars ignored. In the end, those voices proved far more reliable than conventional wisdom. The jungle had been speaking all along. Very few people were willing to hear it. Percy Fawcett was one of them, and because he listened, the world eventually began listening too. When people hear Percy Fawcett's name, they usually think of one thing: the lost city, the mysterious disappearance, the unanswered questions. But perhaps those were never the greatest parts of his story. Perhaps the greatest treasure Percy ever uncovered wasn't hidden beneath the Amazon at all. It was hidden within human nature. Throughout history, there have always been two kinds of people: those who accept the limits of what is already known, and those who quietly wonder, what if there is more? Progress has almost always belonged to the second group. Every major discovery began as an impossible idea. There was a time when people believed no human could cross the Atlantic Ocean. There was a time when continents beyond Europe, Asia, and Africa were unknown to most of the world. There was a time when scientists insisted that enormous civilizations could never have existed beneath the Amazon rainforest. Each certainty eventually disappeared, not because people wished it away, but because someone gathered enough evidence to challenge it. Percy Fawcett understood that process instinctively. He never claimed to possess absolute truth. He simply refused to believe that unanswered questions should remain unanswered forever. That attitude became his greatest legacy. Even now, modern archaeologists rarely speak about certainty. Instead, they speak about probability, evidence, hypotheses, new discoveries. The scientific method itself depends upon curiosity, not certainty. Perhaps that is why Percy's story continues inspiring researchers. He reminds us that being wrong is not failure. Refusing to ask questions is. His search for City Z transformed countless lives, not only his own, but those of everyone who followed. Young archaeologists entered universities because they had first read about his expeditions. Scientists developed better technologies to investigate hidden landscapes. Historians reopened forgotten archives. Entire research project began because one explorer believed conventional wisdom might be incomplete. Few people ever achieve that. Even fewer achieve it without knowing they have done so. Think for a moment about the irony. Percy entered the jungle hoping to change history. Instead, history changed because of the search itself. His disappearance became one of the greatest exploration mysteries ever recorded. His notebooks became valuable historical documents. His observations became scientific references. His questions became new research agendas. In many ways, he accomplished exactly what he set out to do. He forced humanity to look again, to question old assumptions, to reconsider forgotten possibilities. Perhaps that is the true measure of an explorer, not simply reaching new places, but changing the way others see the world. There is another lesson hidden inside his story: patience. Modern discoveries often receive headlines celebrating sudden breakthroughs, but the truth is different. Most breakthroughs take decades, sometimes centuries. Percy planted seeds he would never see grow. Researchers working today continue harvesting those seeds, and future generations will almost certainly discover things that remain unimaginable today. Somewhere beneath the Amazon canopy, ancient roads still lie hidden. Ceremonial centers remain buried. Entire settlements wait beneath towering trees. Each year, another piece of the puzzle emerges. Each discovery quietly whispers the same message. Keep searching, because history has not finished telling its story. Perhaps Percy Fawcett understood something deeper than archaeology. He understood hope, not blind hope, not fantasy, but disciplined hope. Hope supported by observation, by evidence, by persistence, by the willingness to continue even when the world laughs. That kind of hope changes civilizations. It changes science. It changes history. Long after names fade, ideas remain. Percy Fawcett disappeared into the rainforest almost 100 years ago. His footsteps vanished. His campfires grew cold. The jungle reclaimed every visible trace of his journey. Yet one thing escaped the forest completely: his curiosity. That could never be buried, because every new expedition, every archaeological discovery, every hidden city emerging beneath the trees carries a small part of the question he spent his entire life asking. What else is still waiting to be found? Perhaps that question was always the real treasure. Imagine standing at the edge of the Amazon. The sun is beginning to disappear behind the endless canopy. The sounds of birds slowly give way to insects. The air grows heavier. The forest becomes darker. And somewhere beyond the horizon, millions of trees continue protecting secrets that have remained hidden for centuries. Now imagine Percy Fawcett standing there, compass in one hand, notebook in the other, looking toward a landscape that almost no outsider had ever crossed. He had no satellite images, no GPS, no aerial maps, only experience, observation, and an unshakable belief that history still contained forgotten chapters. Many people remember him only because he disappeared, but perhaps that misses the point entirely. Percy Fawcett did not become extraordinary because the jungle claimed him. He became extraordinary because he dared to challenge what everyone believed was impossible. He refused to confuse the absence of evidence with evidence of absence. That simple distinction changed history. Nearly 100 years later, archaeologists continue uncovering forgotten cities across the Amazon. Each excavation reveals another piece of a civilization long erased from memory. Every ancient road, every engineered terrace, every fragment of pottery feels like a quiet conversation across time, almost as if the forest is finally answering the question Percy asked so many years ago. Was he completely right? Perhaps not. Science rarely grants anyone complete certainty. Was he completely wrong? History has already answered that question. Absolutely not. He saw possibilities where others saw impossibilities. He listened when others dismissed. He observed what others overlooked. And because of that, future generations searched where no one else thought to look. That is the true power of curiosity. It does not always reward the person who begins a journey. Sometimes it rewards those who continue it. Today, researchers equipped with technologies Percy could never have imagined are exploring the same forests. Laser scanners reveal hidden landscapes. Satellites uncover forgotten roads. Ground-penetrating surveys expose ancient settlements. Every new discovery reminds us that the world still contains mysteries, not because history has failed, but because history is still being written. Perhaps somewhere, at this very moment, an archaeological team is preparing to uncover another city hidden beneath the rainforest. Perhaps another forgotten civilization waits only a few meters beneath the roots of ancient trees. Perhaps one day, someone will discover evidence that finally explains what happened after Percy Fawcett disappeared beyond Dead Horse Camp. Or perhaps the jungle will keep that secret forever. There's something strangely beautiful about that possibility. Not every mystery needs a perfect ending. Some mysteries continue inspiring people precisely because they remain unanswered. They remind us that wonder still exists, that there are still places capable of surprising humanity. That curiosity remains one of our greatest strengths. Percy Fawcett never stopped believing the Amazon had more stories to tell. Today, modern archaeology proves that he was right, not in every detail, but in the one that mattered most. The forest was never empty. It was simply waiting for someone willing to look deeper. Perhaps it is why his story continues to resonate after so many decades. Because it isn't only about one explorer or one lost city. It is about every person who has ever refused to accept that all the important discoveries have already been made. History is full of forgotten people, forgotten civilizations, forgotten acts of courage, and sometimes all it takes is one curious mind to bring them back into the light. Thank you for joining me on this extraordinary journey into one of history's greatest mysteries. If you enjoyed uncovering forgotten stories like this one, don't forget to subscribe to History Forgot Them and turn on notifications. Every week, we explore remarkable people, incredible discoveries, and true events that time almost erased. Because history is far bigger, far stranger, and far more fascinating than most of us ever imagine. And somewhere beyond the next forgotten document, the next archaeological discovery, or the next unexplored corner of the world, another incredible story is already waiting to be found.